The party cannon blast echoed throughout the castle, shaking every wall. Every pony stopped in place where they were and looked around, trying to find the source of the sound. While the location of the sound was unknown, it was clear the killer had struck again. Celestia cautiously peeked out from the room she was hiding in, unsure if she should leave or not. After another quick look up and down the hall, Celestia walked out and quietly shut the door behind her. She then walked down the hall in another corner towards where she thought that sound came from. Luna was out of breath from running when she heard the noise. She was previously trying to get away from whatever was watching her in the main room. She nervously looked behind her just to make sure she'd lost it, before leaning up against a nearby wall and catching her breath. She knew from the sound that someone else had died, but she didn't know who or where, so she started to walk, hoping to find the victim before anyone else. Applejack quickly ran through the halls, trying to find the source of the explosion. She wanted to get to the scene of the crime alone. If she was ever going to get through the night, she needed to see how the murder played out. Plus, if she was lucky, she could find another suspect at the scene. She held on to her Stetson and picked up the speed. Twilight jerked awake at the sound of the blast and smashed her head on the side of the box. Wincing in pain, she adjusted her position and laid her on her back, facing upward. She couldn't tell how long she'd been out, but she did know that her head was killing her. It felt like someone had threw a dictionary in her face. She was rubbing her head, and she could hear hoofsteps approaching the box. Twilight was unsure of what to do. There was no escape. She was cornered. After quickly going through her options, Twilight fell quickly to the floor and pretended to be knocked out again. Cowering in fear, Twilight heard the top of the box open.
"Twilight, are you okay?"
she heard the cheerful voice say. "Pinkie Pie?" Twilight asked nervously. Twilight looked up to see Pinkie Pie holding up the top of the box, looking down at her.
"Here, let me help,"
Pinkie Pie said as she held a hoof out to help Twilight out of the box. Twilight cautiously took Pinkie Pie's hoof as she stood up in the box. Her head must have been quite injured, because Twilight was very dizzy when she stepped out. Losing her balance, Twilight fell against Pinkie, who struggled to hold her up.
Whoa, easy,"
Pinkie said, balancing Twilight. Okay, I'm fine," Twilight said, regaining her senses. Pinkie waited a second to see if Twilight could stand before letting go. Twilight rubbed her head again as it was still throbbing in pain. "What time is it?" Twilight asked groggily.
"I wish I knew, but I haven't seen you for a while. Why were you in a box?"
Twilight asked the wobbly alicorn. "I don't know. I think I dozed off in my private study, and the next thing I knew, I was locked in the box," Twilight said, trying to recall the info. "Speaking of which, how did you open the box?" she asked curiously.
"Well, despite what you remember, there wasn't a lock on it when I found you,"
Pinkie said, pointing to the open chest. "But Oh, never mind. How did you find me?" Twilight asked, changing the subject.
"Oh, I was walking around near here when I heard that explosion went off, and I found this box at the bottom of the stairs. And everyone knows how much I love presents and surprises, so I just had to open it,"
Pinkie Pie said happily. "So there was an explosion," Twilight said, pondering the reason behind it.
"I think that the killer struck again. We have to go. The explosion wasn't far from here,"
Pinkie said, grabbing onto Twilight's arm and pulling her along. The two ponies walked up the stairs out of the basement. Actually, Pinkie walked, while Twilight somewhat stumbled and limped from the many injuries she had gained from being pushed down the stairs. Nothing serious, but she was still in pain. Since Twilight had been out of the action for a while, she followed Pinkie around. "So, where are we going?" Twilight asked, making it to the top of the stairs.
"Well, I figure that since we know that another murder happened, I figured that we could use this to be the first ones to find it and solve the mystery,"
Pinkie said while jumping in the air. "I suppose so," Twilight began, But where did the murder take place? She asked Pinkie as the two continued down a hallway.
I don't know, but I'm sure we can find it,
Pinkie said cheerfully while turning a corner.
Wait, you don't know? Then why am I wasting my time with this? I mean, the murder could be anywhere. It could take hours to find it. Did you even...
Twilight said before being stopped by Pinkie's hoof.
Why did we stop?
Twilight asked. The pink pony didn't respond, but rather pointed a shaking hoof down the hallway. Twilight turned to see a horrifying sight. The right side of the wall was charred and covered in ash, and further down, a closet door was broken in half, with little bits of wood scattered around the hall. In the middle of all the rubble was a terrifying sight. Cadence's body was lying on the ground, completely burned, bones broken beyond repair and lifeless.
I wonder what happened,
Pinkie said as her hair began to deflate. Twilight held back tears as she looked over the scene. Cadence was dead. There was no denying that. Twilight was about to stand up and leave when something caught her eye. Tucked away in what was the singed remains of Cadence's hair, there was a small piece of yellow confetti. Twilight slowly reached out and grabbed the confetti, staring at it.
Pinkie Pie?
Twilight began calmly.
How did you find me again?
She asked the mayor.
I was just walking around near here. Why?
Pinkie asked, looking down at Twilight.
Because I think you're lying,
Twilight shouted as she stood up and held the confetti in front of Pinkie.
You're the killer, and you saved me from the box just so you could kill me next,
Twilight shouted in pure rage.
Twilight, why would I ever do something like that?
Pinkie said in shock as she walked forward to calm Twilight down.
Stay away from me,
Twilight shouted back.
You're just trying to lie to me. Thanks to you, my friends are dead,
Twilight continued to shout.
Twilight, I'm not the killer,
Pinkie screamed at her while she started to cry.
Oh, yeah,
Twilight began as she looked down at the piece of confetti.
Let's see what everyone else thinks about that,
she said as she ran off to the castle, with Pinkie Pie right behind her.
Everyone, Pinkie's the killer,
Twilight shouted as loud as she could, running faster as she tried to get away from Pinkie Pie.
Get to the main room as soon as you can,
she shouted while running around a corner.
Twilight, stop! Listen!
Pinkie Pie shouted back as she continued to run with her. As the chase ensued, the remaining ponies heard the noise and tried to follow it. Applejack stopped hunting for the crime scene and instead turned to find Twilight and Pinkie running down the hallway behind her. Without a thought, Applejack started following them. Luna heard that they were all heading to the main room and, after gathering the courage to return, decided to head that way as well. Everyone entered the room virtually at the same time, and Twilight quickly gathered everyone to question Pinkie Pie.
It's over, Pinkie Pie,
Twilight began, recovering from the run.
Admit it. You're the killer,
she said, backing into line with the others.
Please, let me defend myself. I'm not the killer,
Pinkie pleaded with the group. After a quick glance and a few nods, Celestia stepped forward and stared down at the pony. Since most of us don't have any idea what's going on, you may give your defense, she said stoically.
Thank you, Princess,
Pinkie said with a sigh. Pinkie then stood up, took a breath, and began her defense.
I saved Twilight from a box she said she was trapped in, and we walked up some stairs. After we turned a corner, we saw Cadence dead. Twilight saw a piece of confetti, and I assume she thought that I hit Cadence with my party cannon. I'm trying to say it's impossible because I locked the party cannon along with all the other supplies in that closet over there,
Pinkie said, pointing to the other side of the room.
Also, the only pony who knew the combination to the padlock on that door is Twilight,
Pinkie said nervously.
Are you implying that I'm the killer?
Twilight asked in disbelief.
Well, there was no lock on the box you were in, that you say you were trapped in,
Pinkie Pie deepanned. Twilight looked around nervously as all the other ponies in the room slowly walked over to Pinkie Pie to defend her.
But there was a lock, Twilight stammered. So you say? Luna said aggressively. But a killer would say anything to prove their innocence. She continued. That's not proof, though. Plus, all of you are still suspects, Twilight said, quickly pointing around to the group. We ain't got nothing against us, Applejack retorted. Well, Luna began. The group looked at Luna with wide eyes as they awaited what the princess had to say. Well, what? Applejack said bitterly, getting up in Luna's face. Well, when I was in here earlier, I may have seen a bag full of dragon sneeze leaves lying underneath the cider table, Luna said sheepishly. That doesn't prove anything, Applejack snapped back at her. Besides, there's nothing there now, she yelled, pointing at the empty ground beneath the table. Plus, you were acting very strange earlier tonight, acting more like a hunter rather than the prey, Applejack continued. I was nervous. Death could have been around every corner, Luna shot back. The rest of us kept our cool. Why couldn't you? Applejack questioned Luna. The two of you stop it, Celestia shouted, standing between them and pushing them aside. Stars above, you're acting like children, Celestia said with a sigh. Don't act so innocent, sister, Luna whined. And what would I have to hide? Celestia questioned. I don't know. Why were you jumping in and out of rooms like a psycho killer earlier? Pinkie Pie said nonchalantly. What does that have to do with anything? Celestia questioned, staring down at the pink mare. What's the matter, little miss? I have nothing to hide. Some ponies spilled the beans, Pinkie Pie said sarcastically. Everyone stop it, Twilight said as every eye shot back to her. We all might have some evidence against us, but I know Pinkie Pie is the killer. It's her party cannon. She was the first one to find me, and she led me straight to the murder. There's your proof, Twilight said, once again pointing at Pinkie Pie. For the last time, the party cannon is locked in the room over there. You can go check. If it was moved, then Twilight's the killer, Pinkie Pie said, once again pointing to the closet. No, Applejack is playing both of you. I saw the dragon sneeze, and plus, she's the strongest. She breaks down the door and moves the party cannon without anyone knowing, Luna said, quickly accusing Applejack again. It's not me, Pinkie Pie. You said Celestia was looking in and out of rooms, probably just trying to find hiding spots for it, Applejack said, placing the blame on Celestia. No, Applejack. All of you listen. Luna's been acting hostile all night. She's just taking her pent-up aggression out through murder, Celestia said as she recalled Applejack's evidence. The group went around in a circle like this for a few more moments. Twilight, as her curiosity piqued, slowly walked over to the closet door. Quiet! Twilight shouted to the group. The group once again looked back over at her. I know of one way to clear up this bit, Twilight said. Pinkie, if your cannon is in here, you're innocent. For now, at least, Twilight said, grabbing a hold of the padlock. Twilight quickly twisted the knob on the lock until the code was complete, causing the lock to click. Open. Twilight threw the door open in the closet. She did remember putting the cannon in there before the party, and she definitely did not open the lock since. The group sat in silence as she slowly reached for the knob. With a gulp, Twilight twisted it, but didn't dare open the door, afraid of what was on the other side. Was Pinkie Pie really the murderer? Or was the killer her subconscious, doing things without her knowing? With a deep breath, Twilight flung the door open. Inside was the party cannon. Fuse lit, and aimed right for her. Twilight's eyes went wide as she screamed as the party cannon went off, replaying the last murder for all to see. The group ducked as Twilight's body flew back towards them, landing with a lifeless thud. As the smoke and ashes was causing the ponies to cough, Applejack got up off the ground and ran to her friend. Twilight! Applejack shouted,
putting her ear to Twilight's chest. As Applejack feared, there was no sound. Twilight was gone. The group sat in silence for a moment, at the loss of their friend, until Applejack realized something. The party cannon just killed another person. Pinkie, why do I agree with Twilight now? Applejack said, getting more intense. Pinkie realized her situation and began to slowly back away. The rest of the group got up and stared her down.
This isn't what you think,
Pinkie Pie said.
I'm not the killer.
She cried out.
Really? Because your potty cannon just killed another pony,
Celestia pointed out.
I know, but I don't know how or why. I'm not the killer.
Pinkie Pie shouted as she began to cry hysterically. The group backed up, Pinkie Pie into a wall and surrounded her. Pinkie feared the worst as Luna spoke up. This is it, Pinkie Pie. We know you are the killer, and it's time to pay for what you have done, she said in a commanding and terrifying voice. Any last words? Asked Luna, staring daggers at the cowering pony. Just as Pinkie was about to give up, she realized something. Something that might just save her.
As a matter of fact, yes. Let me see the poem,
Pinkie Pie said, holding out a shaky hoof. Applejack walked over to the table with the poem was on and brought it back to Pinkie. Pinkie quickly scanned it over, with a wave of relief washed over her.
Look here. It says, one blamed another. That's talking about Twilight,
Pinkie said, showing the paper to everyone. Yes? So? Luna asked in confusion.
Well, it says here that only 5 ponies should be left,
Pinkie said, reading on.
Look here. Applejack said was pointing to an earlier voice. It says, Rome was dethroned.
Applejack read. I saw Rarity in the throne room earlier, so that means... Applejack said with a gulp. That means the killer must have struck there, too, Celestia concluded.
Right. So that's 5 ponies left,
Pinkie Pie said again. And again. So? Luna asked.
I guess what I'm trying to say here is...
Pinkie Pie said, putting the pieces together. The group waited in suspense to hear her conclusion.
Where's Fluttershy?
Pinkie asked, to everyone's horror. One blamed another, and then there were 5.